Every year, the same debate resurfaces. The dollar is nearing its end. A politician steps forward and makes a speech. Another country announces to the world that it has signed a trade agreement using its own currency. Central banks increase their gold reserves. And headlines declare that American financial dominance is finally coming to an end. Yet the strange thing is that whenever a major crisis breaks out, everyone turns back to the dollar. When markets become unstable, investors look for safe havens, banks need liquidity, and central banks take emergency measures. The world seems to forget all its criticisms and once again gravitates toward the dollar. This is where the dollar's real strength lies. Constantly criticized and frequently portrayed as being on the verge of collapse, it remains the common language of global fear and trust. One of the biggest mistakes many people make is viewing the dollar as merely America's currency. In reality, it is much more than that. If the dollar were only a currency used within the United States, replacing it would be much easier. However, today the dollar has become a crucial component of international trade. The foundation of the global banking system, the world's primary reserve currency, the center of debt markets, and even a key part of international sanctions mechanisms. Countries do not use the dollar because they love the United States. They use it because the global economic system has largely been built around the dollar, and changing that system is not nearly as easy as it may seem. This story actually dates back to the final years of World War II. In 1944, countries gathered in Bretton Woods to establish the framework for the post-war global economy. Europe had been devastated, Britain had lost much of its former power, and large parts of the world were still suffering from the consequences of war. In contrast, the United States stood out with its strong industrial base, massive gold reserves, and economic strength. As a result, the dollar became the centerpiece of the new system. Other currencies were pegged to the dollar, while the dollar itself was linked to gold. Although this arrangement initially appeared solid, it gradually began to weaken. America's growing spending and the increasing global demand for dollars placed mounting pressure on its gold reserves. Eventually, in 1971, President Richard Nixon ended the dollar's convertibility into gold. Under normal circumstances, this should have been a major blow to the dollar because the system's fundamental anchor had disappeared. But the opposite happened. Instead of losing strength, the dollar became even more powerful. It was no longer drawing its strength from gold, but from the world's dependence on it. Today, the dollar's greatest support comes from America's vast financial markets, particularly the U.S. Treasury market. Central banks, investment funds, and major institutions hold trillions of dollars worth of assets there. During times of crisis, this market is viewed as a safe haven and has effectively become a giant parking lot for the world's savings. This is why any currency seeking to replace the dollar must offer more than just economic strength. It must also provide the level of trust, liquidity, financial infrastructure, and crisis resilience that the world requires. And this is precisely where the alternatives continue to fall short. The dollar's share of global reserves has declined over the years. China is trying to strengthen the yuan. Europe wants to make greater use of the euro. And many countries are increasingly turning to local currencies in trade. Gold reserves have also been rising significantly in recent years. However, there is a big difference between wanting something and actually achieving it. Criticizing the dollar is easy. Building a system capable of replacing it is far more difficult. What we are witnessing today is not the collapse of the dollar, but the gradual emergence of a more diversified financial order. Countries are developing alternatives, building new payment systems, and trying to reduce their dependence on the dollar. Yet when a major crisis erupts, the dollar remains the first destination investors turn to. This does not mean that the dollar will dominate forever. No monetary system in history has remained permanent. However, for a new system to emerge and replace the dollar, it will require more than economic power alone. It will also need trust, deep financial markets, legal stability, and global acceptance. Ultimately, the dollar's real strength does not come from being perfect. It comes from the fact that the rest of the world still needs it. People may criticize the dollar in everyday conversations, and countries may search for alternatives. But when the storm arrives, the safe harbor everyone runs toward is still, to a large extent, the same one. And that is the uncomfortable but important truth behind the dollar system.